So sorry to keep you waiting.
No, I've been here 2 seconds. Hi, I'm Sean.
Hi, Sean. Peter.
Hi, Peter. Pleasure to meet you.
This is a real head-to-head.
I know. I don't know. This is going to be peculiar.
So I'm a huge fan of what you've done.
Weird. Don't say that.
I think what you've done is incredibly meaningful for this industry. I don't think you really realise just how much your skill as a storyteller has made people realise that it's not just the old formula of throwing a story in a game and it's just some hero saving the day stuff. That
right.
There are meaningful moments where people remember, and that's there aren't stories like that in this industry. Well, there are very few examples.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, I don't know if you feel this way, but I never. All I do, and I should say all we do is think about how a person is going to experience like a moment, like any second of the game.
Yeah.
But I don't actually think about people playing it.
No.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah. It's like the concept that it's going to go into the wild is not a real thing.
I always think that when you make a game, it's kind of like it's a bit like bringing up a kid. You don't, you never think when you bring up a kid, you never think one day they're going to be an adult. They're just a kid, and you don't want them ever to leave home. And that's, when I design games, actually, I feel a bit sort of miffed. There's an English word, which means kind of a bit upset that anybody ends up playing it but me, really. And but you're right. You don't really think of you're going to change anything, or you don't. That's not the way you think. But the result is that this story you told, and the way you told it, and the way you emphasised those characters, was just genius.
Thank you. That's ridiculous.
It was because what it did is it didn't. I think a lot of people get constricted by what they feel are the kind of foundation stones of design, and one of those foundation stones is point and click is an old medium, and you can't really tell a story in it. But then you prove that completely and utterly wrong. And mixing, the genius of that bar was just
pretty much
so powerful. Is that you're thinking, I don't have. Oh, we're recording. Not. We're not recording, are we?
Oh yeah. We're good. Yeah.
I just said.
That's. Can we swear?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I can say.
Yeah.
I said it twice now.
Are you guys thirsty? Would you like an apple juice?
Okay.
I'll take a water if you've got one.
You know what? I will take the apple juice as a. Because that's what you give apple juice to voice actors when they get all they get gummy. Oh. If Lee was like Clementine, it would be no good.
So the genius of that bar, and and how that bar actually really kind of simulated what it would be like in an environment like that. You've got time to go make a cup of coffee before you make the decision. You've got to make it now, and I thought that was brilliant.
Well, I think it's something about like the guys in the team. I think I have a lot of social anxiety, so I think that bar was one of the first things that Jake Rodkin, who's a co-lead in the game, and I talked about, because sometimes somebody will say something to me like, where I'm having a conversation like this actually, or like like at dinner with a friend or somebody who I don't know too well, and I hear them talking, and I know the ball's about to be passed to me, and I'm just like,
that's so true.
And even though it's nonsense, like even though the thing I'm going to have to say is, yeah, great, totally.
Well,
but I start to freak out, and like that is just like, oh, let's just do that, and then you can do that with something casual, and you can also do that with, okay, who's gonna survive this outcome, and it scales.
That social panic you talked about has got me into insane amount of trouble. Because very often I'll be in an interview, and as you say, shit, I've got to say something now, and it's got to be quite interesting. Otherwise, and that is my mental bar that you created. Thinking. Right, it doesn't matter what it is, it's just got to be said.
Yeah, it has to, there's a window where I'm allowed to say it, and then every window after that, it gets weird. And like it had better be profound, or people think I'm having a stroke, or like I'm just silent.
But the worst thing you can do is do nothing,
Of course, you just seem like Yeah, it's the worst.
So that was brilliant. I thought the pacing was fantastic. You're one of the first people really to have solved episodic, and people are looking forward to episode 4, and they'll read, even the title is, read things into it. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's funny, like the way like Telltale was set up by Dan and Kevin was like, these are the things we're going to do. We're going to tell stories like this. We're going to tell them episodically, and we're going to, we'll use some of the point. We're going to have a strong cornerstone in point-and-click adventure, and then we're doing these things, so make something good. Like, that was just sort of like, there's no budging. It's like, well, what if it's not episodic this time? It's like, no, we are doing these things, and there's something about that was over the course of my time working. Not even on Walking Dead, but like where you're so focused on the nuances of those problems. Like what is actually stopping somebody from playing the second episode or looking forward to it? Like what are they doing? Like, you just go mad over it. Like, what else are they doing?
Where did you come from?
In the world?
What made you into the writer that you are now? Because it is the dialogue is fantastic. It's not. It's. There's this rule, is that everything that you see in a film must mean something to the overall film, and I could feel that it was every word and every sentence seemed to have moved the story forward, and so often in games that doesn't happen. You get this blabbing, and I'm as guilty as anyone of that. Of the characters just blabbing on without any meaning behind what they're saying. So where did you come from?
I went to university here in Los Angeles, actually. I went to USC, and I studied English literature and film.
But how did you get from there to here?
I mean, I don't know. I think I just was lucky enough. I had to keep working because I needed a job, and I was lucky enough to be in jobs where I had to produce work, and you had to write words I wrote on a bunch of Telltale games before. Got really into mechanics design in between sort of writing. Mostly how do I facilitate, it's fun to make characters say things. Like the first time you go to a voice session, that's when it kind of all clicked with me. It came off the page, and I could think about the story and the writing in a way that was tangible and meaningful, and I could cut stuff and change things and think about it more thoughtfully, as opposed to when it's on the page and it still feels like it's almost calf inside you, I guess.
That's
so I just sort of doing the work.
Are you saying that? And I have to say, I'm just ignoring the cameras.
Me too. Yeah.
This is for me because, and I'm going to explain why. Are you saying that? They say that a film script is kind of written 3 times. Once by the script writer, once when it's filmed, and once when it's edited.
Right.
And are you saying, is that any different? Is that the sort of thing that you experienced, or is this something different?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. We don't throw out much of the voice work once we've got it. We figure out a way to make it work, but it's just a complete process. It's the writing, it's finding the actor. Yeah. Lucky enough to be able to do the voice direction on things that I write. Oftentimes lucky enough to just do cinematic direction on things that I write, or code with some other people. So you build a relationship. I have a relationship with Dave Fennoy, the voice of Lee, and Melissa Hutchinson, the voice of Clementine. I write for them now, and I don't think about who the characters are. This is just self-evident. And just like writing if I had to write a scene with my mom was in it or something.
How old is Clementine in real life?
She's in her young 30s.
Really?
Yeah, she's tremendous. She's really spectacular.
Because I did a project a long time ago, quite a long time ago, called Milo. And
yeah, I'm familiar. Yeah. I know everything about you. Yeah, please.
And that was a big problem, is finding the voice of Milo. Yeah. Because you couldn't hire a. I thought, like this naive idiot, we'll just go out and find a 12-year-old kid. But then the realization is, you can't find a 12-year-old kid because 12-year-old kids' voices break and they change, and there's all sorts of incredibly difficult to get around restrictions about them. So we had to we had to find out, and actually I found a woman to voice him, and that, in a way, was weird because you wanted to say, okay, what would you do in a situation like that? And of course, that's very hard to do. And
a young boy, I think, is probably there's a young boy character who's only has a few lines, and we just ended up having to say, all right, like a designer at Telltale had a young son. It's like just get him to say these lines over and over and over and over again, and eventually we'll get the right ones. So we ended up writing him. Like I wrote some stuff specifically for that character Duck in episode 3 at the beginning, but we just knew it wasn't going to be the strength of the game, and it was challenging because we knew that Lee and Clementine, alongside sort of the conceit of the dialogue, were day one ideas almost, or just it was going to be a brother and a little girl, but there was very concrete reasons why that wouldn't work, I don't think. So we built the whole thing around that, and then it came to casting time, and everybody's working on the game. You can't just change it. No. And I remember sitting down with Dan, the head of Telltale, and saying, we might have really bungled this, because if we can't find her, the whole thing is going to fall apart. And it was really anxiety. It was there was a lot of anxiety. It was a big risk. I don't know, knowing what I know now about how hard it is, I would not probably do it.
Well, you wouldn't have cast a girl.
I wouldn't have even begun with the conceit of a little girl because I would have been so afraid of casting her. But Melissa came flying out of the heavens and saved us.
But she was a brilliant character there, because she would, I think what for them, and this is my interpretation of it, what she was, in a way she was braver than anybody else.
Yeah.
Because, she could have just collapsed, but she kind of, okay, this is what the world is like, and that's what made her such a brilliant character for me. I cared about her almost, the moment she was in that treehouse and used the walkie-talkie. That's it. You just did it within 10 lines. I was there and I cared about her, and I've struggled all my career to get characters which people care about. That was a brilliant moment, the treehouse moment at the start. Because it was such a clever thing you did, is putting her in her safe place, in her bedroom, but up in the treehouse, and it's just solved all those problems.
Yeah, it's so funny. Now it's like you say, God, it's so long ago we made that decision. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, the conversations around that are, it's a lot of this gut feeling. It's also I think. It's freeing because we make games pretty fast, and the episode, the way it's a very content generative process, you don't have too much time to rethink the stuff. So you have to just really trust your gut, where it's like, oh no, she's in a treehouse because obviously a zombie couldn't get up the rope ladder. If she just pull it up, she'd be safe. She's the one who figured it out, obviously. It's like, and then we just, boop, it goes on paper, and then we don't go back and reanalyze it, and you kind of get lucky when you go back and go, oh, that was a good idea.
It's amazing how so much of design is kind of like that.
Right.
I think the best design is always the design you have to make, the decision you make first before you've had this time to doubt whether that's going to work.
How do you start? How do you where do you begin? That's
a very good question. I mean, I could give you the I start with a blank piece of paper. That's rubbish. I start by having the idea, and the idea is something that just happens, and when it doesn't happen, that's insanely scary.
Yeah.
And that, it's not the big idea. I think big ideas are really easy. Let's do a game about. I think that's the easiest of all the ideas to have. It's the small ideas. Like the game I'm working on at the moment, Goddess, is the idea of it is that everything in the world that a player creates works under simulation, so everything's linked together, and that sounds really great and exciting. But I realised the problem was, and it's kind of like these world-based games all share the same problem, is how do players know? How do you? You can't bring up a box and say, "Oh, everything in the game is simulated."
Yeah,
how do they know? Well, you could, but it would just be the worst thing to do. And I've been working on the game for a couple of months, and that answer hadn't come to me. How do you communicate to the player what they're doing? The answer hadn't come to me, and I just have to sit around and wait for it to come. I can't, there's no meditative position I can go to. I don't practice yoga or anything or go om all the time until an idea comes. It either doesn't come or it does come. And normally, in your treehouse analogy, normally what I find is that the first idea that pops into your head is normally the best idea. And when you actually start over-analysing it rather than saying, okay, I'm going to take that idea and make it work, that's when it goes wrong, when you kind of overanalyze, and to a certain extent you feel like a kind of an idiot savant to these ideas. They're either there or they're not. If someone said to me, right, go away and design this, I'd probably just freeze. I wouldn't know what to do. Yeah. And which makes it a terrifying thing in a way. So it's not an impressive skill at all.
No, but it is horrifying. It is really, really scary when you start with just, we have to do something because that's what we do. And
normally I find the best time for that is the worst of times. It's when you're backed up against the wall for whatever reason, and you think, God Christ, there's a whole team there waiting for this idea, and then suddenly 2 minutes before someone's about to leave because you don't have the idea, then it comes. Many times it's terrible, and sometimes it's okay. So here's an interesting question. My son is, and I have to say that he's 10 years old, and he's played The Walking Dead, and he loved it. Yeah. And maybe that makes me a bad parent because he's 10. But,
he's got to learn sometime.
He's got to learn sometime, yeah. After he's played The Walking Dead, and after he's been looking at a lot of YouTube stuff, he really wants to be a kind of designer writer. What would your advice to him be? Gosh. It's a very common question. Right. How do I get into the industry? And
don't do what I did. Don't do what I did. I mean, I think you can't argue with the journey when you get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm really happy where I am. Like, I got here, even if I had to go through the brambles, I wasn't that hard. It was just sort of directionless. But it's such an exciting time. I think it's such a thrilling time to be on that side of the beginning of it. Like, he could literally still be an astronaut if he wanted to be. Like, that's so incredible.
What I'm after from you really is, obviously at 10 you can't plan out which university you're going to go to or what company you're going to work for, but should he be reading, should he be playing, should he be, how should he explore this excitement that's inside
I think
him?
Reading is so important. I think reading, it's fundamental, some say. It's like an old American PSA.
Okay, so now you see that bar's come up.
Right.
Now you've dug yourself a hole, because I'm going to ask you the question.
No.
What should my 10-year-old read?
What should he read? Oh my goodness. Okay. Now that the bar better be one of the longer ones.
There you go. I warned you. You're running out.
I just read. So my dad read a lot growing up, and he read a lot of just pulp stuff. There was his books, but they were like paperbacks you buy in an airport everywhere. So it wasn't, I was never really given the classics. What I didn't get in quality, I was given in quantity. So I just had this pile of material, of stuff to read. I read all the way, there's an author, I don't know, she might be British, Judy Blume, no, she's American. But I read like all of her books. I read these, like, my dad would give me books from his childhood. They were like these like Hardy Boys adventures, or like Alfred Hitchcock pulpy things. Like, and then he would just start, around 10 actually, he would just start like giving me anything. So I remember when I was in the 4th grade, we had like reading time, and you had to bring a book, and I was reading The Shining.
Wow, that's impressive.
Right. And I remember reading The Shining with you. Where did you get that? I was like, my dad gave it to me. She's like, interesting. And
so the 4th grade is
10.
Is 10.
10. Yeah. So that equates to at least the thematic content can equate to.
That's fascinating. I think it's what he doesn't like. Like, a lot of 10-year-olds are like this nowadays. He doesn't like books written for 10-year-olds.
Right.
They're not
Yeah, but the
not
thing is, like, I don't
interesting
think
enough
books
for
are. There's nothing dangerous in a book. Like, you can give him any book on the planet, and he'll be fine. I really believe that. But I think the thing that was so important about reading is it very early put me in sort of a mode, like a reflexive mode of when something is happening to another person, how do I feel about that, and what would I do if I were them? And that feels fundamental to game design to me.
Yeah.
So I think books, more so than anything, than movies or, my friend Chris and I talk about this all the time, just can really foster empathy in really, like that's a good literary fiction, and even pulp fiction can do this, where you're put so deep inside the mind of your narrator that, whether it's the protagonist or an omniscient narrator, that you're having to build a connection with another person's consciousness and figure out what you think about that.
That is so interesting, because I can't think of, and maybe The Shining is the only example, I can't think of a single film. Firstly, I can't understand watching the film of the book that you've read. I mean, it just doesn't work as a medium for me.
Right.
I'm not sitting in the cinema thinking, oh, that's what that character looked like. Because you don't get that same in the mind. You don't know the characters. It's just like looking at the set. Even something like Lord of the Rings, I don't. Right. Brilliant though it was as a film, it just made me slightly angry, because my Gandalf wasn't anything like that Gandalf, and I wonder if there has ever been a film that has done that really well, converted from the page and knowing characters to.
I've always thought that was. I mean, we're kind of. It's like I wish I was talking about really impressive, read the classics. But I think what's interesting about something like Harry Potter is that it kind of, because there was only a brief window where somebody could read the books and build those images for themselves.
Yes.
That basically, if you were a kid who found those books after the first 3 or 4 years, you were never going to have that opportunity, because there was just $100 million marketing campaigns with telling you what Harry Potter looked like. So that was always sort of a thing that I was a little.
I suppose you're right.
About.
It was Harry Potter was as much defined by the film as it was the book.
Eventually, I mean, I don't think J.K. Rowling would probably say that, and I think she's a very masterful storyteller, but I think just the nature. I think she gets it. Yeah, I read. I remember I was going on a work trip. So my first job, I worked here in LA. I was working for Disney, and I had to go to Shanghai, China, for a long time to manage a thing. I was 22, I think. And I read all of the last book on the plane, and I thought, I mean, maybe it wouldn't hold up for me now, but it was absolutely it all came to the point where it meant something. And I think when Harry is walking through the forest at the end, and his parents are there, metaphorically with him, and then there's sort of some strange metaphysical things at the end where he goes into kind of a different dimension, and there's a crying baby under the table. When he's walking into the forest to give himself over to to Voldemort, God, I can't believe I'm talking like this. It felt like all 7 books were written towards that point, and they all were all headed there.
Yeah, that's a fascinating thing. I mean, I loved. There's so many things I loved about Harry Potter, and there's so many things that I found kind of very slow about the overall series, and that once I get addicted to pace, and then you kind of want that ball to keep rolling, and then.
I have this brain where I forget about that stuff. Where people there was
it's so true.
There's a 70-page Quidditch match, and I was like, oh, what?
I don't remember that.
That didn't happen. Yeah, it did. But I don't know. I think by the time I was 11, 12, 13, I started just picking up the summer paperbacks at more literary fiction, the bridging point between pulp fiction and something like Infinite Jest. I would pick up sort of the paper, the literary fiction paperbacks at a Barnes and Noble or a bookshop, and those had specific narrators that had faults and things that you make this click, right? You make this thing when you mature, where you realize that people telling you things could be lying to you, like that people talking to you might not be might not be a good person. And I think when you read books from age whatever you can start reading until you're in your early teens, you just sort of go along. The idea of like you're taught about an unreliable narrator, but you don't actually believe that. But then you get to the point where like, wait, I don't like this narrator. This person's bad, and then that's a phase of your reading career. But then you get beyond that, and you start to ask, why is this person the way they are, and can I empathize with them? And then I think you've arrived at a place that's like very healthy and really great. And that is what I think helps make. It sounds silly, but I think it makes for. It's a two-way street. I think it makes for good game design in that. I always just imagine my audience is thinking about the characters in the game at that level, so they have to be honest at that level. They can't just want an idol, a thing. They can't just be after a thing. Like, if they are just after a thing, that thing has to be emblematic of the fact that, like, they're just they actually want something else. And I think
that what you're talking about is, I think what you're talking about is like motivation. It's like the motivation of your characters and the motivation of the player when presented with the motivation of the characters. And that's another thing which I've always kind of tried to worry about or not forget about is, what motivates me to do as a player, to do something, to get from point A to point B. And it's certainly something I try to think about. And when I forget about that stuff is when the terrible mistakes come in.
Yeah. I think what's like something like Black and White is there's sort of these two. At least this is a personal anecdote. Like I remember playing it. There's sort of what is this mode? I'm like, what is going to happen if I do this? And what is this? Okay, I go through. I'm learning how to play the game, but also what happens if this happens? And then there's I wonder if I can get X to happen story. And I think that's a really powerful story. And it's why I like a lot of systems-driven games. Like I play probably more systems-driven design games than I do sort of explicit narrative games, because those personal stories are like, I wonder if I could get this to happen if I did this.
I'd love that.
And that is probably why I play games, but it's always been it's been challenging, especially over the past 5 years, I would say, because that's not where my design sensibility is. Like my design sensibility is more in where I'm going to write half the story, and then I'm going to give you the tools to write the other half with us, and that's going to tell a very pointed, explicit experience. And I don't play games like that, really. I play games where I'm like, what is going to happen if I do?
Well, there was some of that in Walking Dead, I thought.
Yeah.
When you were in the chemist, when you were in
in episode one,
in episode 1, I kind of felt, I wonder what would happen if I.
Right.
And
I just wish it was so much. It's because it's, if we were going to take 5 years and just make the most incredible Walking Dead season on the planet, I don't even know if we would. It would be counter to what our mission and goal is, but I would love there to be that stuff, where it's I wonder. But then for me, it always falls apart. I never know how to answer this question, which is, okay, when the player kind of bends and crimps the armature of a very thoughtful plan and then executes on it and then expects an outcome, is that outcome, what is going to be the engine or the heart of that outcome? Is it going to be something that myself or any designer or writer at Telltale or anywhere preconceived, or is it going to be these AI-driven AV?
See, this is exactly the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, and I just never. You go one step down simulation, right, and then you don't know where to say, but then an authored outcome happens, and it's I go crazy. I go absolutely bonkers crazy.
It's almost a systemic thing. Is that, and what you're talking about is freedom. The thing is, when you think about freedom in a game or anywhere in life, really, freedom sounds a more exciting concept than it actually is.
Oh, totally.
Because
freedom,
if you've got ultimate freedom, you've got the ultimate way to bore yourself.
Right.
So freedom without motivation.
There's a lot of bored billionaires.
There's a lot of bored billionaires.
Yeah.
Freedom without motivation is a dead end, and that's what I was talking about. Partly what I was talking about in Godless is how can you, even if you have an impossible motivation, like I did this crazy experiment called Curiosity. And the impossible motivation there was to get to the center of the cube.
Right.
That is better than nothing, even though that's such it's an incredibly long journey that you're putting people on.
Right.
But still, if you turn around to anybody and said, "I'm making a game, you're free to do whatever you like," they'd probably say, "Yeah, well, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Of course, I'd love to do that."
Yeah.
But I suppose if in the chemist example, if you said to someone, right, and you did this really well, you've got the problem, you've got to solve, you've got to get out of this, you've got to clear the zombies, you've got to go over there, then that's not so bad. And then if you were to break everything down into constituent elements, like, for example, the lighter fuel on the shelf is combustible by X, and the cotton wool, holds liquid. I mean, you could do that, but as you say, you're having to write an enormous system to support what is something which ultimately 99% of people will probably do more or less the same thing. If you had to start a fire, you'd look around for a can of petrol. You wouldn't look around for, if I mix, this chemical with this chemical, it's going to make something combustible. So it's one of those systems which it sounds more exciting than perhaps it actually is.
Right. It's because it puts a lot of pressure on just really, really brilliant level in game design, which is important, I think, when you start to, which is never my strength. But at the beginning of the second episode, and a guy named Mark Darren was in charge of that one, and he's just the best. He's really fantastic. We all kind of brought all of us sat in a room and talked about this beginning, where these people were going to come to the motel. They were going to say, "Oh, we have food. You guys are starving. Come with us. Do you want to go with them? They want gasoline. Do you want to give them gas? How much gas do you want to give them? If you give them gas, they'll give you this much food. Sometimes you give them all their gas. They'll bring you and show you something else. When you get to the farm, you can say like, oh, we don't really like it here. We're going to go back and talk it over. You go back and talk it over, and we took the narrative and broke it up into as many possible chunks, causal chunks as possible. Created content for them, wrote dialogue, acted and animated characters, and then stitched them together in a way that was almost like it was like to the point of simulation. What else could they want to do?
Yeah.
Maybe they want to fight this guy right now. Maybe they want to go inside and think it over. You kind of explicit narrative your way towards simulation. We put it in front of people, and people were just either A, everybody just went to the farm, or B, they just were like, I don't really know why they sort of like, it's like they want more. Like, well, why can't I do this? Or why can't I do this?
Yeah, you usually have to sort of kind of talk through people. Well, it's a shame you didn't do this, because if you had done, if you'd given them the petrol, and you would have noticed there was a shifty look in their eyes, and that would give them the clue that they were actually going to meet you in the end. And you end up kind of narrating, well, no, you shouldn't have done it that way. You should have done it that way. Well, that brings me on to an interesting one, which I wanted to talk to you and get your opinion on, mainly because at work, Jack, the person I work with, is incensed by it, and I'll be very interested in it. Let's talk about Heavy Rain.
Okay.
What's your views on Heavy Rain?
I think it might suffer a little bit from the thing I was just talking about.
Yeah,
exactly. But I don't think The Walking Dead would exist without Heavy Rain, at least in the same way. I feel too. There's sort of Heavy Rain as the game that is in sort of the broader game ecosystem, right? Of just sort of it's on the shelf with everything that's been made. And I have a very specific feeling about that, which is I'm very happy it's there. Thank God Sony let David Cage spend all that money, you know? And then I have the gameplay experience. So this is how I feel about that. I think suspension of disbelief is most important in a game where you're telling a specific story about a specific character. And I think my suspension of disbelief, I can do so much at such a high level of fidelity, my suspension of disbelief is broken. And I think when you're telling a story in a video game, if you damage the suspension of disbelief, it's hard to get back. You can get, we're like, oh, that would never happen. We're like, oh, that looked like, that's looked like a video game.
So what was the moment that happened for you?
It's so silly, but when my wife told me to get, it's early, it's very, very early. My wife told me to get the plates in my house.
Yeah.
I didn't know where the plates were. And I was like, I would know where these plates were. I remember being like, look, we're together. Unless this is part of, unless this is part of the meta narrative.
I remember her getting unnaturally upset.
She was
about
really
the plates.
frustrated about me having to find the plates.
Oh God, I thought, this marriage isn't going well.
I was so neurotic. I was like, wait, maybe this is maybe I'm supposed to feel like this. Maybe I'm not this guy. Maybe I'm an imposter. And I was just like, looking for they were in a hutch, like a low hutch next to a table.
They were in
a peculiar place.
Jogging to the kitchen.
Yeah, and I'm like looking where I would put them.
And I immediately empathized with that and thinking, do you know what? I am incompetent with these duties that I should do. You know, I shouldn't have just know where the plates are. I should have cooked a meal.
Right.
It should be on the table now.
Right. And I felt like I didn't. It was in this weird gray zone where I started to think, am I not getting it because I'm not smart? Like, not just I'm not getting where the plates are, but I'm not getting what this means about who I am or my gameplay experience. So I started thinking about that stuff, and then I started thinking about like, well, should this guy know? I would know. I'm gonna go outside. So I went outside and I stood in the yard for a minute. I was like, look at those plates. So now I'm role playing
like a male idiot. Yeah.
Just like,
I don't know where the plates are. That's your job. Yeah.
Then she's like, plates, where are the plates?
But so that was such a shame, though, wasn't it? That was. I mean, for a start, I loved the game. Mm-hmm. I finished the game, and that was a special thing for me to finish that type of game from start to finish. So I absolutely loved it, and if you're a parent, that mall scene is it's a horror. It's a horror which every parent has probably experienced. So I love the game, but I know what you mean. There are moments in the game which are frustrating like that.
And I think the game is a triumph in a lot of ways. It's so tough when I'm thinking about all these things and I'm not thinking about who I am and what I'm feeling about. And I feel like that's the magic thing. That's the thing where if you can get somebody for 90 minutes from like controller pick up to controller put down to not think about anything else but what's happening to them or their character or the other characters, then it's like go home. Like you did it, And I think most of the design decisions that I either argue for are in the service of that. Like, don't let the player think about anything else. We owe them that. They came here to think about this story.
So are you saying that because what I think they were trying to do with Get the Plates was get you used to opening the cupboard like that.
Right.
That's really what they were doing. The whole sort of first house scene was all about getting used to this very brave control mechanism.
Right.
But, of course, we, the players, read more into it than, that's a moment in the game which is always so difficult, is how do you, with the character you're going to play, how do you teach the person to play the game? Right. It's like the opening of Halo. I remember, okay, Master Chief, let's check out your suit. Look up, look down, look left and right. For Christ's sake, if he doesn't know how to use his suit, how is he going to save the universe? What chance have we got? And you know, that is such a difficult. It's such a difficult third time. That first opening few moments, it's terror. I always find it terrifying.
I'm trying to remember. You have to tell me what it is because I can't think about I can't remember. In Fable, I'm trying to think of the first thing you do. You're the bull,
So in Fable 1 and Fable 2, they were kind of identical. You started as a little kid,
right? Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons I started as a little kid, was so that, you know, you were kind of like 7 years old, and little kids don't know how to do lots of stuff. You know, they're certainly not swinging, you know, big swords and weapons. And they had, because the little kid, and this, I had thought about exactly the way you're thinking, is that if I'm going to try and get the player to be a hero, I can't start them off as an adult and then this is how you swing a sword.
Right.
But I can do it with a little kid, and it kind of makes, I mean, I'm not trying to say that Fable had a great narrative.
No.
I mean,
I've completed all of the Fable.
Well, I apologise for Fable 3. And, you know, I blame myself entirely for Fable 3, because the team did a brilliant job with the amount of time they had, and I should just pushed for more time. That's our job as a designer, to say that we need more time. But, you know, Fable 2, I really loved making the game, and I really loved to kind of, learning to write a story, which I thought, you know, to try to do the best to guide the people, and that's what I end up doing. Is I don't write individual lines, I just try to guide people. And so the opening of Fable 2, I did think about exactly that point. You can't be a hero. We're going to try and make people a hero. We've got to establish that. So you had a little kid with the sister in the kind of streets of Bowerstone.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Trying to make it charming and reasonably safe and a little bit experimental, so that I know that at the start of a game people love just playing around,
right?
You know, and the start of a game is a bad time to sort of dive deep into the character and motivations, because you when you just paid $50 for a game and you just want to play, you know, you don't want to be preached at.
Yeah, there's a designer, Brendan Chung, who is might have another person working now, but he's a one-man design shop. He does it's called Blendo Games, and he's a friend, and they made a game called Atom Zombie Smasher, which is a top-down sort of tower defense game. And he made a game called Gravity Bone. It's sort of when he went independent, he made it in like Quake 2, and it's this linear narrative. You walk through and you do things. And then I've talked to him just a lot about game design, and he's just obsessed with the first 5 minutes, and the first 10 minutes, or 5, and then it starts to taper off. And it's really, over the past like 5 years, made me obsessed with that. Just everything. In that first 5 minutes, it's the launch of the rocket ship. So whichever way it's pointed is where we're going. He made this game called 30 Flights of Loving that you should play. It's really great. It's a 15-minute sort of it feels like new wave cinema, first person corridor story.
What format is that?
You can play it on PC.
Okay.
It provides narrative context in such immensely dense, just these dense frames, where it's you look up and you get the entire setting of the story in a frame. And then in the next scene, you can do what you're talking about, where it's like, I'm just gonna just do stuff. I can do whatever I want. Like, okay, I can jump, I can do these things. And the next scene, the rooms are small. The next frame, more story, boom, in 3 places. And you just look over and you're like, oh my gosh, this is who I am now. And then the next thing, the conflict. And he does it all in like 45 seconds, a minute, depending on how long you futz around. And it's I really think about it, the beginnings of games all the time.
It is so.
I just think about it constantly.
It's so difficult. There's so much work you have to do. I think what I'm tending toward, I had this thought recently, where we used to do, in the old days, it used to be easy because you used to have, players were used to having 45 minutes of tutorial. You usually have to read loads of and then, you were frantically clicking through saying, for Christ's sake, I know it's WSD to move, to scroll around.
Right.
You're frantically there, and then it was done and you're thrown in. And there's been a big move to sort of sugarcoat those tutorials in some sort of narrative, like the Halo Bungie,
Portal 2 has a good
Master
one.
Chief. That kind of made sense, and that's where that sort of thought is where Fable was. And then lately, I've been thinking this is if I'm brave enough with the game I'm doing to say, I'm not going to tell you anything, nothing. This is, and the game I'm working on, it's an insanely different way of controlling a game. It's nothing else has used the mouse like this. I'm just going to risk you discovering it yourself, and if you discover it yourself, as long as the motivation's right, then that joy of, oh, Christ, I can do this, I wonder if I can do that, then that, at the start of the game, that should be the most, can be a really powerful moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's this irresistible temptation of me saying,
just do this.
I'll just give one sentence, one simple sentence, or just show one, quick time movie, just to teach people. But
well, they'll own that discovery, and then they'll love you
exactly,
for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then they'll absolutely just adore it. Yeah.
And so what we've done is, and one of the things is being an independent again. Is you have to kind of go back to basics, and one of the things we tried to do is think, right, we're going to use Kickstarter to find the people who we can try these things out on and see if it works. So we tried that out, not telling you anything at the start. And there's and this is interesting, I like your view on this. What percentage of people that don't get the start, if it was 90% that didn't get the start, that say, I don't understand this game, you'd obviously, you go back to the drawing board. What percentage does that scale move on? Do you actually go back to the drawing board? Is it 50%? Is it 5%? Is it 1%? Is it 0? And where do you say, oh, okay, this has worked or this hasn't worked? Because in today's world, you can be as empirical as that, because you can be looking at people.
You can look at actual metrics. I think it's interesting. I mean, I don't know where to begin, but I do think that we have that as a content problem, but never as sort of like a holistic design problem. But we'll have things like, only 3% of players are going to see this. And whereas over here, we have something that is not, let's say each of them is necessary for the story. They're sort of like middle, we could probably cut either of these things. We're thinking about two things to cut. We have this thing where 3% of the people are going to see it. And this one where 97% of people are going to see it. But we really like the 3% content. I'll generally argue, and I have to make a business argument for it, but I will generally say you have to balance it, because you have to think of the audience as a whole. But you know what? If we don't think the 97% content that everybody's going to see is really, it's okay. It's not that great. Like let's do the 3%, because what's going to happen is somebody who told Clementine this one thing and also like saved the guy from falling down the thing, and then ended up in the morgue with the guy, and the guy says to him, bada 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 ba, or the guy does this thing that is so tailored, and only 3% of our audience is going to see it. The amount of joy that those guys are going to get out of it is so high.
That's an interesting concept.
And they're going to tell their friends that happened. And now the myth of the game, when they talk about it to their friends, like, you're not going to believe this, but I told Clementine this, and then later I saved this guy from certain death, and he comes to me and tells me that I had told Clementine this. Like, can you believe that? And then now the game has this what else can the game do? And that's something that I think is really But that's a content problem. That's not what you're asking.
Well, that's the inverse of what I'm asking.
Right.
That's the 97%. But that leads me into another question, which I have to. Is this because? Do you think like that because you read The Shining at 10, and we all know that there are these hidden messages in the film, that Kubrick supposedly, have hid in the game, and that to reinforce your point. When I started looking at those hidden messages, I thought, I've got to go back and see The Shining. Right. There's all these hidden messages in there, maybe...
There's something really special about somebody far away who you don't know taking the time to make something that is going to be for you. Yeah. And I think that's it. Like, that's something that's really, really special. And I think you can just, if that is why you're making games, then you're going to make a lot of people really happy. Or you can also, at least you're.
Especially these days when it's so easy for an idea to kind of virally spread around the world. Yeah. So that, as you say, that 3%, maybe, it's a bizarrely difficult thing or an unlikely thing to happen.
Right.
But when it does happen to that 3%, it gets shared around.
I have an idea for a game like that, actually, where it's just sort of, that was sort of that's what was really cool about the cube, right? Is like, you don't know when that boy touches that cube, and he's just, what's going to happen?
Well, I was going to experiment with this.
Right.
With the next experiment, and we cannot spin on these experiments just for the sake of doing the experiments. We've got to use what we got for curiosity in something, and that's what our focus is. But the next experiment was kind of to do with that. Is can one problem be solved by people sharing information? And so what it was another stupid thing, really. But and part of the reason why it was so simple is because we didn't have enough team members to do anything more complex. But what the idea was is that and again it was another mobile-driven one. You'd see it would be a room, and on that room there'd be this big ramp. And at the bottom of this ramp would be another cube. The reason I chose a cube is it's just a simple, structure. You can't really read anything else into it. And with your finger, you can push the cube, and it'll move, infinitesimally small. There's a little number above it saying how far in inches it's moved. And you push it, and it moves. But the more you push it, it slows down. And what you realise is you've got to get other people to push it at exactly the same time on their device. And can you do that? Can you and the simple algorithm said, right, if 10,000 people push all together precisely at the same time, then they can push it to the top. If it was 9,999, they'll get it within an inch of the top. Yeah. And I was fascinated to see if the world could come together and solve
for
that.
one microsecond.
Yeah, for 1 microsecond. I think that would have been and what I was trying to find out is how concurrent really is this social media that we all talk about? Could everyone get together and say, right, let's sync our watches up.
Right.
Because that was the first part of the experiment, was there was no, if I put a counter in a room, like if it was, counting up some scale, then everyone would say, right, when it gets to 1,000, let's all push.
Right.
But there wasn't a counter in the room.
Right.
So you've all got to use your local time zones and, 9:56. I thought you meant 9:56 in England.
Right.
It would have been an interesting thing to play around with.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
It was just a lot of what curiosity was experimenting with. Firstly, it was experimenting with this device. There was one of the things that I thought when I started designing Goddess, which is, the reason I'm doing it is to try and make a game which is going to be a great game, and I don't, I haven't really made one of those. I don't think, and
I would disagree.
I'm trying to be honest without. I wish the cameras weren't on at this point, because I really feel that I'm, I'm so well known that the games that I've been involved with that have been done, I'm just the ideas guy, there's brilliant people behind it, they should be better to justify that. And this is my chance to actually, say, okay, I'm going to try and make a great game. And one of the things, if you're going to try and make something really great, one of the absolute definable things you have to do is understand your audience, understand who it is you're making the game for, especially in the mobile world where no one really knows who these people are. They say it's, there's 1 billion smartphones around.
Right.
Well,
that's everyone.
Who are they?
Right,
I mean, there weren't 1 billion people on console. They're certainly not all console gamers. Right. And they're certainly not all people who've never played a game before, because, Angry Birds have been around. So what Curiosity did was trying to work out, okay, if I look at everyone who's played Curiosity, I look at when they play, how long they play for, and I give them some element of freedom in this overarching, get to the center of the cube. So we really carefully thought about, tapping with one finger or tapping with lots of fingers. And that was fascinating to see that some people tried to make Curiosity into the most exciting thing they possibly could. They kind of tapped frenetically fast, where other people were, you could see it by when they played during the day. They had a nice tap at the end of the day, a nice thoughtful tap before
That's the
going.
one.
Exactly. And that was fascinating, to really realize just that one mechanic. You could kind of work out, okay, this percentage of people here, what they really want is a way to relax.
Right.
They want a way just to chill out. Maybe they chill out watching television. Maybe they chill out reading a book. They were using, where other people were, on the edge of their seat, probably getting RSI from tapping so much, and wanting to get to the end. And that is a fascinating thing. When you think that, especially with games like The Walking Dead, there are all these new gamers being created. Probably while we've been on camera here, there's probably a few hundred people that have been introduced to gaming for the first time, and that's just an amazing, incredible thing.
Yeah, that's the part I can't ever think about. It's so funny. We were saying at the beginning, and my dad played The Walking Dead. It was the first video game he's played since he and I used to play Mario, Super Mario.
What did he think?
He really loved it. He really, really liked it. It was, that was really special. That was a big deal to me. That was a big, big deal. He liked it for the same way he likes books and he likes things. And that was the thing that I was like, all right, we did good. We all right. We just gotta, let's what can we do now? We have some core things that we should really believe, that we should hold on to. And I was really pleased about that.
Sorry, I missed that last
part. Just sort of the core things that people carry a stranger's baggage. They're him, but he has a life. He had 34 years of life, like Lee, before you got to him. And he has rocks in his backpack. Will somebody carry those? We had no idea. We had no people, why do I gotta be this guy? I don't like this guy. There was this playtest where this 11-year-old came in with his dad, and he wrote, it was who is your favorite character at the end of it? He writes, Lee, because he makes all the best choices.
That's pretty good.
I was just okay. I just couldn't, I'll never forget that. That was really, really interesting.
So you talk about playtesting.
Right.
How many people did you playtest?
It's we do sort of a lot of different things. We do company-wide ones, but we bring in small groups. We bring in 8, 10, and just watch them and talk to them when they're done. And it's not, you don't need, because there's not you don't need the one playtester to find the crazy way to beat a level. It's just get some humans of different walks of life who like these sorts of things and let them experience the story and see if it's resonating with a handful of people. and then you get people from a different walk of life and it's resonating with them, then you're speaking to a person and that checks the box.
And honestly, how do you feel when you get bad feedback from a playtest session?
It just means we have more work to do. If somebody, there's always the playtesters like, well, I thought so-and-so sucked. Like somebody's somebody said, which character did they hate? Maybe like Lily or somebody, they're like, and they just wouldn't get off of it. Like, I don't know, Lily just sucks. She's such a bad person. She sucks. And I'm like, okay, now I've gotten everything I'm not gonna change anything because she's eliciting response. You really feel this way about her, but this is actually saying more about you now than it is about the rendering of the character, because you won't give her a break. You won't think about the fact that her dad is a domineering, like probably at one point physically abusive, like angry man. You won't think about the fact that she's now in this confusing emotional time where he's just been killed by somebody and she misses him, but at the same time there's a part of her that is maybe happy, and she's becoming a monster over it. Like you're not thinking about any of that stuff. But then if somebody else tells me they are, then I'm like, oh, okay, maybe we're right.
But that's the strange thing about playtest for sessions. What I find is that, firstly, showing somebody a game that's not finished is tough. It's tough emotionally. And what I find is when I get the feedback, there's kind of two voices inside my head. One of the voice is like my inner kid, and it wants to say, well, just off out. Get out of here. Get out. Get the out. I don't want anything to do with you. They'll slap me in the face and throw me out the window. And the other one, the other side of me, and this is the inner conflict, says, that's very interesting. Maybe there's a problem there.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you which one of those two voices
you're going to
get. It's but you kind of have to, it feels like, especially if the game's not finished, it feels like, and this is when you do press as well, it feels like you're kind of ripping your clothes up, standing there bare for people to point and laugh.
Yeah.
I find it takes a lot of bravery to do that.
It's really horrifying because if it's just still going to be there, the game is still going to be on the screen, and everybody's just going to be like, oh, this is bad. But it can't respond. The game can't be like, actually, wait 20 minutes, something great's going to happen.
It's just the
game just has to stand there, just being subject to it, and it is emblematic of everybody who worked on it. So you're standing there as well, and you can't say anything. It's really, really, we got lucky. I don't really engage like the forums and the internet and things like that and comments. I get Twitter replies and things like this. But we got lucky in that it wasn't too bad. But I know it's like if I go down the rabbit hole of really caring about what people think, once I believe that it's a good effort, that the game out there is the best we could have made with the time and resources we had, and we're proud of it, then it's gone. I don't care anymore.
No, I know what you mean. Forums are a scary place to go. It's like the gates of hell reading.
It really is. It's like you can't even really think that it's even remembering that they exist is terrifying. I had something I was going to ask you about. Feedback mechanism is really, really peculiar. It's probably harder with your games. I think it has to be.
Well, it's easier these days because you've got analytics. You've got, it's funny how, your job as a designer changes over the years. Now, there's a lot of effort in deciding before you finish a version that you send out what you're going to look at.
Right.
Because you can look at anything. Right. You can look at every single click of the mouse and every single twitch of the finger. And it's not a case of having the power to see how people play. It's deciding what question you want to answer, and that's fascinating. But there's still things that you need to ask people, and I just stumbled on this thing, which just feels like it makes a big difference, and that is that on Google, I don't know if you've ever been to Google Drive.
Mm-hmm.
If you use Google. On Google Drive, there's this free survey thing, and you just can fill out the survey stuff, and it does all the survey stuff for you. And then you can embed that in the game. So in our alpha, at certain times during the game, it comes up and says, what did you think of this? And, and because most people don't, if you give them a big white box, they won't type anything. So you can, you can give them the opportunity to type stuff in, or you can give them a multiple choice. And that's been incredibly useful.
Right.
Just to say, to ask, right, you've got to be careful not lead the questions. What do you think that there's more or less? There's more to go in the story. It can be a very directed, pinpoint question.
Right.
So that's quite.
That's always
that's
how you frame
useful.
that is going to, definitely.
And what I find is that mostly people's responses in forums are kind of almost there to just to be seen to type something.
Right.
Whereas if you ask them a specific question, they feel like they're talking to you directly.
Exactly.
So
that's really valuable.
So
do you have? I don't need to go down the playtesting too much further, but do you ever playtest other people's games?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's such a weird experience.
It is.
So
it's fine if I do it anonymously, but of course, if you playtest, and you'll definitely find this. If you playtest someone's game, then and it's interesting walking around the show here.
Right.
After this, I'm going to go to the indie section,
uh-huh.
and I kind of want to put on a big beard and dark glasses, and so that I can play it as I want to play it, and is to kind of be inspired by what those people are doing.
Right.
Where if as soon as they realise it's you that's playing it, then there's this terrible question: what do you think?
Right.
And
so
that's when you think, oh shit.
The bar
what am I going to say? The bar's just that long.
She just jumped through a plate glass window.
You said you had a question.
It was just that. It was just anecdotal. Playing the first time coming after really going through a bunch of playtests for something that I felt a lot of ownership over, going and sitting down at another studio and playing a game. The guys who made Bastion and Transistor now, I playtested their game.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember sitting there and I was like, I can't tell you anything because everything I tell you, you're either A, going to hate me, or B, you already know how to fix it. You probably already know I'm going to tell you. It was so challenging to me. It's like, I don't want to be, it was so hard.
I had that problem as I kind of, for a while, my career took this kind of side turn in at Microsoft, where I was going into teams like Rare and all sorts of different companies and doing that, playing the game, and that was just insanely hard. I kind of wanted to say, look, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Can I be honest with you?
For Christ's sake, don't take any of this advice.
I don't even know why I'm here.
And you just felt like doing that because it was a lose-lose situation.
Right.
You can't walk into a game and say, right, here's A, B, C, just do this, and it'll all be fine. That's not the way it kind of works.
And even if you could, it would be horrible because you would come in and you would say, well, actually what you want to do is you want your protagonist to do this, and the X button should do this, and the Y button should do this. Anyway, good day. And then they would implement those things, and then even if it was successful, they'd be like, oh, well, Peter Molyneux did that. Like, that wasn't what we were going to do, but it worked. So it's like, it feels like that mechanism is bad, even if it has a positive outcome. It's just kind of,
It's very difficult. I mean, I think as a developer, I often wish I had someone that would do that for me.
Right.
I could send it to gaming design god, and they would come back and say, do A, B, C, and I'd go, oh, well, that's a relief. I could just take a bit of time off now.
Right. Yeah.
So what's next? What are you going to do next?
More video games. It's nothing to really say out loud. Telltale's doing season 2 of The Walking Dead. Really some exciting, just sort of long future narrative stuff that I think is going to be really cool. I think, and also the stuff that people are talking about, that we're talking about season 2, who you are and what you want and what you're doing and what happens to you, I think is going to be bonkers. I think it's really something special, and that's the focus right now.
Do you feel in any way, because I don't know how the link works with the comic and how the link works with the TV series, but do you feel, where it feels like there's a kind of triangle now between those three, and where do you feel that you're pulled in any direction?
No, it's funny, I think because Robert Kirkman, who writes the comics and writes the show, he's the son of that universe, so everything orbits around him. And there's a part, we're way more autonomous than I've ever thought we would have, like 3.5 years ago when we started, or 3 years ago when we started. I never would have thought that it would just be sort of tell a story in this world, and then if we can find places that have meaningful crossover, let's absolutely do it. But that is not the mission.
Because Herschel,
is in all
the
three.
Same is the same
in Glenn, and those were things because we were afraid. Those were like very calculated business decisions of, well, people aren't. If we had to earn trust, so you better see a Herschel, you better see Glenn. If you're not Rick Grimes, if you're this guy, then we have to big in your face, like, this is Walking Dead, don't worry. But then once you earn that trust, do what you want. And that trust has been established, and we don't have a big mechanism of like sign-offs. It's just sort of Robert Kirkman goes, and we go, great. And
I was so disappointed with the last season of Walking Dead, the TV series.
Oh, I haven't seen it. So,
what do you mean you haven't seen it?
I don't watch the show hardly at all because I read the comics like every single issue, but I hardly watch the show because I don't want the two to become similar. I think I want them to stay the way they are, and like.
But you've seen season 1.
Season 1 and season 2 of the show. Yeah, and I sort of said, okay, around midpoint of season 2, there started to just sort of be like themes and things that we were exploring, and just setups and things. And I was like, they'd start creeping into our meetings.
Is that because you don't want to corrupt your vision with their vision? Why is it different from?
I just think even just the pace of the story might change. I think the pace of a TV show is very different, like what the sorts of things that can happen in an episode. And I'm really happy with the pace of the game, and we all are. So it's, I mean, I'm only speaking for myself here, I should also say. Like, I think other members of the team are watch every episode.
But I still don't quite get that, because you read the comics, you read all the comics.
Right.
Why is the TV series more corrupting than reading the comic?
It's sort of like, well, the TV show feels like it's sort of like retelling the story of the comics, but in very different ways. It's not like a different.
Okay.
It's not so. I have all the information, and also like we license the comics, so like the show is this other ancillary thing, and just to be completely in the clear, it's like I don't want AMC to be like, well, the game feels like it's taking some things from the show, but you guys realize the comic. And I mean, furthermore, I think because there's actors and it's alive and moving, and it has, you could run a movie of the game next to a movie of the show. You couldn't really do that with the comics. There's something about that visual medium similarity that I think it's best served as for them to be distinctly different.
Yeah.
And also, if the show goes a place I don't like, I'm like, I don't want to get mad at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I suppose so. Well, we can't have the conversation I kind of wanted to have, which was a good 5-minute moan about the last season of Walking Dead, in the vain hope.
Robert Kirkman's head would like slowly rise behind me, and he would like just choke me out and pull me back.
There's a hell of a lot of zombie stuff around. Isn't there?
Yeah, it's weird. It's funny is I don't speak for myself here, but I don't really like zombies that much. But I like the pressure that they put on something, just the dread of this is happening.
I think they're
to
great
us.
bad guys.
Yeah,
and I because they're kind of like the Borg in Star Trek. They're completely heartless. They've got no morals. They're just animalistic, and they kind of represent the most bestial side of us, and that makes them a great thing to be frightened of. It's just fascinating to me is that entertainment is very focused on post-apocalyptic scenarios, and I'm sure someone's done some researches what's it mean about, because we're telling these disaster stories, what's it mean about society and the financial crash and all that stuff? And I wonder what if you thought there was anything in that sort of maybe ridiculous.
No, I mean, I think that's obviously, like, I think if you look at the heritage of zombie media, that is definitely, there is a, like, really strong critique of modern society, of capitalism, of sort of marketing and just a homogenous thought in general. But it's funny, like, that those themes, while present, the people in the Walking Dead game are sort of outside of those themes because it's been going on for so long. So those themes feel, when it's been 6 months, 9 months, a year and a half now, and they're still just trying to survive, those themes feel outdated for the characters. Like, what is a shopping mall? What is, like, so we don't really focus or think about those so much. But I do think there's something just about the dread of a terminus that is really interesting to me. And I think that's the thing that really I latch onto, of that is what I'm going to become no matter what happens to me. If I die old in my bed, I'm going to sit up 5 minutes later and be one of those. And also, we can't stay here so long because they're going to be here. That sort of everything, that there's sort of that, time was always the thing. It was always the thematic core of the zombie story for the video game, and that's what informed the dialogue mechanic, the passage of time. It's why the episodes had a very concrete, the distance between episode 1 and episode 2 is 3 months, then it's 2 weeks, then it's 2 days, then it's 1 day, and then it's 1 second. It's collapsing of time. And that was something that was really important to the thematic structure of the game.
Yeah, that's interesting how, I mean, it's such an interesting world to write a story in. I've always wanted to write a game about, not a month after the disaster, some post-collapse. What's interesting to me is the first 15 minutes. Is if you, and I actually did a game design for this, and it was something that we worked on for a couple of months. And the premise of the game was this: is that the opening scene of the game is a family existing and in their house, and then suddenly, without warning, there's a message on TV saying, the world's going to come to an end. You've got 15 minutes. What do you do?
Wow. Yeah.
And that is that freedom element. What
right.
Do you go and find your parents? And you've only got 15 minutes. Do you go to that bestial side and go and the neighbour's got a shotgun, I'm going to kill him, and and that's such a fascinating thing. And then what happens to the world, and that, as you say, time. I think it would be fascinating to actually analyse what would happen if 99% of the world's population did just disappear.
Right.
What would happen? How long would it take nature to come back?
Yeah, those are the things. Season 2 might be. I think you should experience.
I think that. I mean, I'm going to be incredibly upset if there isn't some post-apocalyptic event in my lifetime. I just think that's going to be unfair.
That's going to be.
I've dreamed about it so many times.
You'll be in your element.
I'm ready. I'm ready to go. And I've solved the problem. Let's ask you. Right. Suddenly, we look out the window. We're sitting here. We look out the window, and you see, obviously, there's a zombie. What do you do?
Just a zombie?
Yeah, there's one zombie there. This is the start of the outbreak. You know what's going to happen next.
Right.
You've got probably 24 hours before. What are you going to do?
Today is difficult because my wife is far away on a trip. So that would be, like, she's in the Caribbean.
She's in where?
In the Caribbean? Yeah, she's in the
Lovely.
Bahamas. Yeah. She's an anthropologist, so she's
really?
doing anthropology there.
Well, you've got to start evaluating her skills of survival.
Right. Well, the thing is, I would instantly say, like, how am I going to get us together? That is going to be my goal. But
you're dead. That's it. That decision you just done.
Game over.
Forget about that. I mean, if you're gonna,
the good thing is actually I rode
to the Caribbean. I mean, you've got zero.
I mean, so I'd be okay in that. I rode my motorcycle here today.
Uh-huh.
I rode it down from San Francisco, and I've been writing season 2 at my sister's house all week, so I'm not even actually here technically. But I rode my motorcycle, so I could get on that, and that'd be good. It'd be traffic, it'd be snarled, and I would be fine.
I don't know. Well, motorbike is definitely better than the car.
Right. Yeah. Get the motorbike, step one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's only one thing you can do, and in fact, you might just be able to save your wife if you do this. I've worked it out. I've got the perfect survival kind of thing. There's only one place that you could truly be safe. I don't know if I should tell you. I don't know if you've got the survival
honey,
skills.
I'm with Peter Molyneux. You gotta come with.
Yes.
You gotta get to this place.
Yes.
He's a game designer. He's fantastic.
But it's obvious. The best thing you could do is you could get on a boat.
Right. Well, that was the thing.
A boat. You could get on the boat, and then you don't have any problem with zombies. You can sail around.
Fish.
You've got
you can get
fish.
a desalinator and have water. Everything you need. All right.
Solved.
All right. Well, you and I will get on a boat.
There's one slight problem
and
with
make
my otherwise
games.
brilliant plan is I cannot sail, I can't navigate, and I'm not a really good swimmer. So other than that, really.
So basically, I am going to be taking care of you on this boat. Is what you're saying? I have minimal sailing skills.
Fat
I know how it works.
Oh, okay.
So I will just basically shepherd you across the ocean.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
This is so good. Yeah. This is truly a fantastic conversation. I didn't know how this is awesome. Yeah. Seriously great. Yeah. So good.
We're good.
Are we good?
Yeah,
I don't know what the time is. I'm just thinking of what is this? Is this too much content? I mean, because we must have been talking
I don't
for
care. That was fantastic.
That was seriously, I can't tell you, one of the best conversations I've had in a very long time.